Coming from a business school, moving into an art school, the first 3 months I spent here, I lost nearly 10 kilograms because I didn't understand the language. I had no idea what people were saying, what they intended to teach me. But I stuck through. And I actually graduated. Only a couple of years back, I did the evening classes, so it took me 5 years to graduate. And while I was in the process of graduating here at the KBK, I got to think, like, every time when you're nearing the end, you'll always start to reflect on, okay, what did they teach me? I also did the exact same thing with the Erasmus. But I looked at myself as Le Petit Prince. And what I did was, for my graduation, I wrote a thesis. And it was pretty much like a business plan. So I used all the goggles they had taught me at Erasmus University, and I looked at the art world. So I made a dissection of the art world using my legal perspective they had taught me, the economical perspective, the sociological perspective. And one of the most important parts, which I actually thought that the Academy had failed to teach me, was to learn how to look how the art world is organized. So what I did was use one of the principles I was taught during business and as my work as a marketing advisor during my study. I had a full-time job working in the fields of investment, first of all, and then changing over to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs while I was studying here. And one of the principles I had to do was use a lot of project management. And I know for a lot of people this sounds like the Chinese I encountered when I first came to the KBK. But project management actually has a tool and a principle, and it's called the Kleine Prinz 2. It's a method a lot of people in business use to actually do their business management. So I used this principle and applied it to the art world. Now, I'm not going to bother you with a lot of yawnful stuff about what I actually did with the business plan, as most of you are artists here, so I'll relate it to you. One of the important things I thought that I wanted to tell was the art game itself, and I started making this slide with all those bullets, and then I remembered, well, this is not the way I want to communicate. So don't worry, this is the only slide with bullets in there. But it does host 3 very important parts of the art game itself. And the art game, if you look at the art world, it's actually just a game. You've got the playing field, so to what extent is the art world? And is there a difference in, say, the Dutch art world or the European art world compared to the American art world? Then you've got the players. So I identified what kind of roles the museums had, and curators had, and gallerists had, but also people who collect art, and art critics. Little did I know that it was just only half the list I made when I graduated. But ever since, I find out that businesses alike play a huge role in the art world today, especially when the government is stepping back due to cuts and so on. Businesses play a more important role than ever before. So I thought that this image was actually much more interesting. This is made by a friend of mine, a New York artist, William Pohida, also known as Bill, who I met on occasion, mostly when he's drunk out of his mind. He made a game, and it's literally called the Game. The rules can be found, and the URL is below, so I suggest you go there and you search for it, because this game actually shows you what it takes to become a successful artist. Even though it's made for fun and for relaxation and recreational use, it has a lot of truth in it. So how would you end up from say the Bronx Museum in New York. Of course, it's all based in New York, being the capital of the art world still. It goes all the way through, like, what kind of representation do you need? What kind of galleries would you need? And that's what I meant with the previous slide, playing by the rules. There are a lot of set rules, none of them very descriptive. But those rules are changing because the players in this art game are changing. Okay, one of the artists I would like to mention first is Yayoi Kusama. She's a very successful artist from Japan, and this is actually a picture of a work of hers in Boijmans in Rotterdam. And as you can see, it's a mirror room. And one of the most important aspects of her work is that you interact with it. You as an audience, you as a spectator, interact with her work. Well, what has she got to do with Louis Vuitton? Anyone? Thought so. She and Louis Vuitton actually struck up a deal, a collaboration. And as you can see on the left-hand side, that's a picture of a window dressing of the Louis Vuitton store in New York. The other one, on the right-hand side, is the Louis Vuitton store in Cologne. So, how does this rhyme? Because her work, even though it's very graphical, and it's very strong in color use and dots and so on, it's very recognizable with the amorphic forms she uses, but how could you combine the two? Louis Vuitton, on the one hand, being so exclusive that most people don't even dare to go into their stores. Kusama, on the other hand, making work which is aimed to interact with the public. The public needs to be inside of it. So how do those two combine? I feel that doing these window dressings, there's a strange mixture of the intent of the artwork and the goals of Louis Vuitton. How could an exclusive brand collaborate with an artist who seeks interaction with the public? Because her works in those window dressings aren't accessible for all. Normally you would interact with them, but all you can do now is take a distance and look at it. When I was in New York recently, I spoke with one of the Louis Vuitton PR agents. And he went on and on and on about how he wanted to mix Louis Vuitton with these big and established institutions. Well, the big institutions, just like the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art here, already have a status which is very exclusive. They already have a huge boundary for people to come in. I'm not saying that they're not doing it successful. They have the highest visitor rates everywhere, apart from the Louvre in Paris, by the way, but in America they're the biggest. But what would happen if you would combine a museum which is already exclusive and trying to deal with that with a very exclusive brand? I asked the PR agent this summer, and I said, well, how could you combine the two? Because the goal for a museum is make art accessible. But layering over this link with Louis Vuitton, even though some people might aspire to it, I'm guessing not much people here in the audience perhaps, but how could those two be combined? Another example of a collaboration I found also in New York, as most people might know, this is the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, also part of the Museum Mile, just a couple of 100 meters away from the Met. There they organized a biannual 2 years ago. The first biannual called YouTube Play. They aimed to open up the world of crowdsourcing and using YouTube videos and put them inside the museum, so giving them merit. I can honestly say they failed miserably. What happened was they collaborated with companies like Google, Hewlett-Packard, Intel. Those aren't like little tiny companies, right? But what they failed to communicate and what they failed to do was actually take the audience, which normally looks at YouTube videos, and make them popular by clicking like or clicking view when they're viewing YouTube. That's like the biggest variable in YouTube, right? How many likes and how many views you've got. Well, they forgot to include the audience in this. It was a 4-day event, as stated on their website, but what it actually entailed was one small event one evening inside the museum, where 25% of the audience there came from Google, 20% came from Hewlett-Packard, 20% came from Intel, and 20% came from the Guggenheim Museum itself, which leaves around about 15% of people which could attend, and those were art critics, high-up curators, art reviewers from New York, big collectors. So where was the audience in this? Oh yeah, and the other 3 days they had an evening program on the outside facade of the building. That's it. You can imagine that if you Google Guggenheim right now and look for YouTube Play, as it was announced 2 years ago, so which would mean that this year would be the second edition of YouTube Play, you can't find anything apart from the old links. Now, how does that work in the Netherlands? Many of you might recognize the bathtub, which it's called. The Stedelijk is opening tomorrow, officially, but it's been open all this week with selected and exclusive groups of people already. But how does this translate into the Netherlands here and now? The Stedelijk itself always had an honorary hall. When you went into the old building and went up this huge flight of stairs, you would come into this hall, which was called the honorary hall. This is actually a picture of what it looks like right now in the Stedelijk, and this is Carl Andre lying there. But Carl Andre is no longer in the honorary room. Carl Andre is actually in the IMC room now, because IMC, the International Market Share Corporation, is one of the big sponsors of the museum. So I ask you, in which room would you prefer to be? The IMC room or the honorary room? Well, it doesn't stop there. The Stedelijk itself has collaborated with a vast amount of industry players. Just next door to this one, if you see in the left back, there's an opening. That's the old build to the new build, and it actually goes into the Van den Ende Foundation room. Of course, Van den Ende has started this new fund, which he is generously giving to cultural initiatives and so on. But to have an entire room named after you, and to top it all off, there's a lot more rooms named after their sponsors, but to top it all off, just below this room, there's the Audi room. So, which brings me towards the other player of industry, BMW. Now, what has BMW got to do with art? Well, you could turn car making into an art, but maybe there are much nicer cars you could get instead of a BMW. But what they've been doing for, I believe, 18 years is make art cars. This one is actually the art car which Jeff Koons made last year in 2011. Now, this was presented at the TEFAF in Maastricht. And the TEFAF is, of course, the biggest worldwide art fair for classical art. Now, what does this say about the values of BMW being transponded or being sent out by this art car? And what does it tell us when they ask a contemporary artist like Jeff Koons to come up with a design which he probably doesn't make himself, he signs it, just like all the other big ones are, but present it at TEFAF, which is the art fair for classical art. To put a contemporary piece into a classical art surroundings, how does that make any sense at all? And how does this convey all the key words that BMW wants to be associated with? I couldn't come up with any. And fortunately, I wasn't alone. An entire meme on the internet, most of you might know what that is. That's like something that gets a life of its own, and people are starting to make creative suggestions of how things could be different. Well, one of these suggestions was this car. Of course, many of you would recognize that this is the balloon dog Jeff Koons is known for as well. And BSA engineers did some not so well executed Photoshop job, but it gets the message across that it would be much more interesting to see a dog like this transposed on a car and turn that into a BMW art car. Because then BMW would have sent out the message that they are open to innovation, that they are open to contemporary art. Well, one of the other art cars, a year before Jeff Koons, was made by Robin Rode. And it actually didn't include the redesign or remaking of the car at all. What he did, he had fun with the car. And he used a Z4, like one of the convertibles of BMW, and put paint on the tires and drove over this huge canvas. I feel this is already a lot more interesting than any of the stuff that Jeff Koons had done. And please remember that these art cars were made not just by Jeff Koons, but also a Jenny Holzer, a Warhol, had made a couple of those as well. Well, the question remains, if you see this, of course it's much more fun and it's young and it's energetic, but why does it have to be BMW? There's still no answer to that question. Why couldn't it just be Opel or Volkswagen or...
Different market.
Sorry?
Different market.
Of course. Let me get to that later on. What I would find much more interesting... Hoe zet ik hem aan? Even een muis.
Ja, praat maar door. Deze?
Ja.
Hij doet het ook gewoon.
Anyhow, Jacco is going to look at the technique and I'm just going to talk. What I would find much more interesting is to actually see this. Okay, we're just going to wait until the sound goes off again. This was the end result of a project made by Ypres Rubing, a Dutch artist who lives and works in Berlin. He used a huge crowd of anonymous people wearing hoodies and masks and stuff just to prevent the law from intermingling with their project. Now, what happened was that over 2,000 cars actually helped to make this piece of art. And of course, you can question the merits of this piece of art, but you could also question the merits of that piece of art made by the BMW car. The difference is that there was actually interaction with the public. This happened in Berlin, in public space. A lot of people standing there at the moment it happened. A lot of people interacted with it and thought, what the hell is going on here? Who are those people with those paint baskets in front of their bikes and scooting away after they dropped it? Of course, it got a lot of exposure. So in that sense, it's the exact same purpose it has as the BMW action with the car and the paint on its tires. But the difference is, this was intended to be an art piece. And it wasn't just a PR stunt pulled by some big brand to pull in even more acceptance of that brand into a certain group, a certain target group, the market, as the gentleman in the row just mentioned. If there would have been some brands smart enough to interact with this, and I must add, this is all biodegradable paint, so there's no harm to the environment whatsoever. It all dissolves into the rain if it comes afterwards, so there's no harm to the environment whatsoever. But if a smart company would have jumped on this, it would have given them so much more exposure and so much more guerrilla goodwill than the BMW act could ever have done. Well, I've got another brand for you. Now, you might say, what has Gogh got to do with art? Well, some 11 years ago, they actually came up with a brilliant plan of incorporating one of the Netherlands' biggest names at that point in contemporary art. Well, contemporary, it was from the Cobra group. And they came up with bowls and whole table settings printed with cornea. Now, how does the Gogh brand transcend into cornea? Was cornea struck for money when he agreed to this? Or was dementia setting in? Or how do the two mix? I can't see any of the values of Gogh transponded into this piece, into these bowls. Of course, yes, you could save up these coupons on the sauce bottles, which in the Netherlands is very popular. Like saving up for things and doing coupons and the DE-punten and so on. That kind of stuff, air miles, you name it. That kind of stuff works the best in the Netherlands. I don't know why, maybe because we are very cheap, as some people think we are, gierig in Dutch, that we want to save up and get our money's worth of stuff. Even though this was pretty popular back then, this is like 10, 11 years ago, so some of you might not remember, but even though this was very popular, but what did it do for the Gogh brand? Pretty much nothing. Yes, it was a big success and sources went through the roof because people wanted to have those coupons. But after that, it died. There was no connection whatsoever with the Gogh brand. And who wasn't brought up with it? That's their slogan right now. Wie is niet groot mee geworden? Well, another brand for you, Illy. Most of you might know that this is coffee. That's what they're doing right now. Illy has an art collection which they're very proud of. And I had the fortunate circumstance that I could meet up with one of the ILI managers of the art collection. This is Jan Faber, as you could see, but if you visit our website, a lot of big names have cooperated with the ILI brand. But I just like the red and the white in this, so I kept this one. But, so where's the difference between ILI and a Calvé? Because they both brought out these cups and saucers and so on. But there's a huge difference, because for ILI, this is just the start. ILI's, namely, is represented and partnered up with the Frieze Art Fair, which in a couple of weeks is held in London, and ever since this year is also held in May in New York. Together with the Armory Show, which is held in March in New York, those are the numbers 2 and 3 in the world in art fairs. So they hook up with those art fairs, and they communicate their brand values. ILI's always in the search for something new and wants to have good quality and so on. But what's even more interesting is their relationships with, say, the Arco in Madrid, and the Artissima in Turin in Italy, and the Art Rotterdam. What they've come up with are different plans and different programs for young and emerging artists to get funding, to work for a year. They get huge amounts of funds, those artists do. ILI doesn't get a lot of press because they're not that interested in that part of press. This is just something that they do and fits in with their brand values. Another thing which also derives from the ILI concept of their link to art is that they organize Galleria ILI, which is a traveling cafe which sets in one particular town each year. So it's been in London, it's been in New York, it's been in Berlin. And here comes the link to the artists who do the coffee cups. Those artists are actually present at the Galleria ILI. So they give presentations, they do interviews, they do performances, making their work accessible for the public. And that's the reason museums are what they are. They make things accessible. So by collaborating with ILI and the artists, they make art accessible. But there's one thing I need to mention earlier. I might have been a bit black and white on the Stedelijk, because there's something you need to remember as well. I said the honorary room is now called IMC room. Well, that's because IMC has made that rebuild possible by a huge donation they made. And IMC is not in it for just this one go. Of course, this was a one-time investment they put in to get the museum started. But IMC has been investing in the Stedelijk for many, many years. IMC is the one who makes the kids' magazine possible and the children's workshop. So IMC is interested in getting the message across and making art accessible for the public as well. Now these days, especially with the younger generations, museums are finding it way more difficult to get the people in. Especially young people are used to getting what they want, where they want it, and when they want it, preferably on their smartphone. Now that's a huge difference. Yesterday, Julian Oliver came here and talked about art in public spaces. Julian Oliver, together with Damien Stewart, developed the Artvertiser, some sort of guerrilla way of replacing ads in public space with art. Well, I was invited by Jocko not just because of the different backgrounds I'm in. I have the business and I have the fine arts because I graduated here as well. But I'm also part of a project which is called Times Square Art Square. And what we're doing right now is working very hard to align all of the goals of all those different companies and stakeholders to turn Times Square in New York into one big blank canvas for art. And that's not going to take, it's not going to be replaced forever. But the way we are going at it is getting all those goals of all those different companies aligned. So those billboards are owned by the building owners. Then they have a group of investors who actually own that building again. Then there's the media agency who manages what is being shown on those billboards. There are political parties and political organizations who decide what kind of events could take place in Times Square or not. So all those different stakeholders need to be aligned. And that's what we're trying to do right now. That's not going to be overnight, as you can imagine, because you've got all these different parties you need to work with. But instead of seeing a Samsung ad on Times Square, wouldn't it be much more interesting to see a collaboration between Samsung and say, a media artist and what they could come up with, sharing the same values? So in that sense, my first slide was, what's art got to do with it? Well, I gave you a lot of different examples of collaborations between the industry who I felt that sometimes speaks a completely different language than creative do. And what's art got to do with it? In some cases, the art was very pale. It was just a PR stunt. There are some good examples in there as well of art which actually collaborate together. So look for actual collaboration, look for the values you hold dear and work with that. That's it.
Thank you, Martin. Just a quick question. You're very critical of situations in which the industry just wants to throw its name at art initiatives to look cool or respectable. Very critical of that. You're also very critical of artists, let me just phrase it like that, selling out and doing stuff that is not compatible with how their work is usually presented, like a Japanese artist, very interactive, very inviting, end up a window dressing for Louis Vuitton. So if you, in general, what would be in your top 3 of conditions that need to be met if these kind of collaborations are to be successful, looking both from the artistic perspective and the industry perspective?
Well, to elaborate further on Yayoi Kusama, of course there was more in there for her than just doing the windows for Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton was also a contributor to 2 of her shows, one in Tate Modern in London and one in the Whitney Museum in New York. So of course there was more in there for her than just doing the windows for Louis Vuitton. And I'm pretty sure that she gets a cut from the specifically designed bag she did for Louis Vuitton as well. So that's the selling out part. Same goes for Jeff Koons. I'm pretty sure that he got a lot of money to sign his name on the back of that art car. But Jeff Koons, as we all know, has a background in economics. He used to work at the Wall Street Stock Exchange. And doing something commercial like that is nothing strange in his whole oeuvre of work. He's always working on the banality. Like in the new Stedelijk, there's this huge pig which is holding, like the Hummels statues, that's in the Stedelijk right now, and it's called in ushering in banality. So he always plays with the commercial part and so on. So in that sense, it does make sense. But a lot of others, like, well, Andy Warhol had a commercial sense as well, but Jenny Holzer was also always very opposed to commercial messages. The stuff she did in the billboards on Times Square protect me from what I want, was one of the texts she put on the billboard there. Some I can't understand. Like, I can't see how working together with BMW as an artist would reflect on your own working ethics. But of course, then again, everything's for sale, so some artists might scoot over to perhaps what some call the dark side and think, hell, I'll get the money and I'm already established, so it doesn't do much for my merits anyhow, but it's okay to cash in. Other parts? Okay.
Questions?
Maybe not really a question or a remark. I don't think we should be too conservative about this industry and art relation. I think it's more the individual choices that the artist is making himself, doing commissioned work and doing uncommissioned work. We live in a world that is moving much more to neoliberalism, capitalism, and things like that. We are forced in these kind of directions. I think we should take these chances and try to balance out on an individual level how far do you go. And maybe you make a shitload of money on one side and do your autonomous work on the other side. I don't see any problems with that. And I think it's also the artistic responsibility to inspire these boring companies like Louis Vuitton making ugly beds to get a better image. There's no problem with that, I think.
Just a question for you then. You basically boil it down to it's the artist's individual decision. There's no general disliking of these kind of collaborations from an art perspective as it functions in society.
I don't think there's anything new about it. Like the big painters in the 17th century were also working on a commissioning basis. Now it's maybe not a private rich guy who's commissioning, it's just a company or a corporation. Your question?
It's on a general level, art in society, art being critical of society, reflecting on society, can that still be done if art teams up with the industry, sits on its level?
Of course, why not? That's also the individual responsibility of the artist. How far do I go with it? The example of BMW, I don't really agree because BMW is also investing millions at Guggenheim and inviting architects, designers and artists to come up with any idea. They don't give like a straight goal or a target, they just give the funding. I don't think a car company like BMW is right now on the R&D level, in the innovation labs. They're not interested in designing a new car. They're interested in concepts of mobility, for example. That's why they want to cooperate with artists or with creative people. I think the balance should be quite clean.
Well, there's of course a huge difference in BMW's new path. BMW and the lab which they've created, that's much more towards the mobility questions you're addressing. Of course, it also has to do with urbanization and urban planning and getting local inhabitants involved. But you can't disagree that BMW working together with the Guggenheim and making this Guggenheim lab hasn't gotten that much acceptance either, because they were banned from Berlin in fear of people of the area being gentrified and yuppies coming in, because that's the association of BMW. So there is something to say. I'm not saying that any collaboration should be hold, not at all, but any collaboration should be well thought of and also present the values and make it a logical choice for brands to work with an artist in a certain way. If Hoorweg had invested their money for this campaign into scholarships for students, be it engineers, be it artists, be it scientists, that would have made so much more sense, especially with their tagline, "Who hasn't been brought up with it?" than collaborating with a Corneille.
because of the relationship with developing artists.
Yeah.
Okay. That's Ola van Gogh, by the way, director of today's art festival.
My name is Marco Habermas. I'm a composer, sound designer. So my question is more about music. I think something radical has changed over the year. I don't see too much in the graphical art, but in music, I think more or less 20 years ago it was not done to be sponsored by a brand. Nobody did it. Nobody considered doing that. Even Neil Young made a record and he was saying, I ain't playing for Pepsi, I ain't playing for Coke. But if you now start a new band and you say, well, we have our first gig and it's sponsored by Apple, everybody loves you. So I find it really strange that music became so commercial in such a short time. And I can't fingerprint what's really the cause of it. You have an idea of it? Money? Only money?
I'm sorry, I'm not that well known in the music industry. Of course, I've seen things like sell a band and crowdfunding starting in the music industry first of all, and it not being accepted at all in arts first of all. But apart from the fact that a lot of Kickstarter and now For the Kunst and so on jump on the crowdfunding bandwagon because that's the only answer that could be given towards the cuts that were made in the budgets that were available for a very, very long time. So, but I'm sorry, I don't know enough about music to answer that.
Do you feel that the commercialization of that in the process has affected the quality of the work of the artist or the integrity of the artists themselves?
Well, I'm having a dilemma with that. Last week I saw the Foo Fighters performing for Apple, and it's just a commercial break for the Apple event, yeah. And the Foo Fighters are very well known. The Foo Fighters is the what's the original band? The guy who shot himself. Nirvana, yeah, indeed. Kurt Cobain would never do that probably, yeah. Which is strange. So the Foo Fighters are now a commercial break for Apple.
But Kurt Cobain died in a completely different era.
Yeah, but what made that change? Is that the money? Foo Fighters are extremely well known.
Well,
so they don't need money.
Okay.
I think we got an answer back there.
Cool.
Hey, my name is Ross. Could it be that it's from the whole change of consumption of music nowadays? Like nowadays, everything, at least I haven't bought an album for, well, 10 years or more. I mean, I have bought one or two, but not. My main way of consuming music is changed radically. I'm not even paying now for music, so that's personal preference. So that could be, I think, one of the big answers. And now everything transfers to gigs, like concerts. That's the only way for music artists to kind of get a lot of money.
And apart from that, a lot of musicians do their own promotion as well. If you look at the Gogh album, I'm not saying that it's the great music you could imagine, but Gogh got his attention by putting his video up on YouTube, and then it went viral. There was no label there in place, or maybe some, but a minor player in the field. But there's a lot to be said about doing it yourself promotion. So
we've got another question here. Hospital part of industry, I think. When you talk, I get the idea that you relate art to PR.
Well, no.
Industry is much more than PR. Much more than PR. It's a very small part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps not you, but we could look at your art and relate it to art also. Because I think creating a new car is also an art.
Oh yes, definitely. But creating a new car, that was not what is intended by, say, the BMW art cars. There was some modification, but...
BMW has already influenced you because you think they're the dark side.
Oh no, I actually drive a BMW, so...
No, it doesn't matter, but they are focusing on certain kind of people that want to buy BMW because they have an image.
No, I'm not...
Trying to support that image in all kinds of ways.
I didn't say that that BMW's efforts, like I mentioned before, the BMW collaborating with the Guggenheim and creating a lab which is temporarily within local residents and let them think about the future of their environment they live in, is a transition from a collaboration which resulted into the BMW art cars. And yes, some collaboration I look at merely not from a PR viewpoint, but as a PR stunt. That's the difference. I'm not saying that there's not much more behind it. There's a lot more behind it. There's the influence of the artist on the designers themselves and on the people who work for BMW, of course. I'm not denying that there isn't. But the BMW art cars, to show the contemporary art car at a fair, which is aimed at classical art, doesn't make any sense now, does it?
The only thing I think I want to mention is that public relations is a very small part of industry. And it has a big focus because PR uses art or something, imagination, whatever. But when you look into the other parts of industry, there are perhaps more artful things than you could imagine.
Oh, definitely.
So when you're an artist, you could also participate in designing a car or whatever. It's perhaps more fun. Okay.
Well, it definitely is. I would love to discuss it further with you. What kind of examples you have?
I'm not sure if our third speaker today would agree with the fact that public relations is only a very small part of the industry. It used to have a public affairs at Shell.
I'll come back to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that later.
Okay, we've got room for one more question. One burning question you have. No burning questions. Okay, Martin, thank you very much.